The shuttle was small and cold. Kang Doyun sat alone, watching the stars pass by through the tiny window. He had been traveling for 3 days now, and his back hurt from the hard seat. But he did not complain. This was the chance of a lifetime. Doyun was 28 years old. He was an engineer from Earth, born in a small town near Seoul. He was good with machines. He could fix almost anything. That was why the United Earth Coalition had chosen him for this mission. They needed someone to work on a Vellani research ship. The Vellani were aliens. They were smart, logical, and very, very cold. He had read about them before leaving Earth. The Vellani had silver blue skin and long pointed ears. Their eyes were pale colors like violet or gold. They lived for almost 300 years. They had joined the galactic community long before humans even built their first rocket, and they did not like emotions. To them, feelings were like a sickness, something to control, something to hide. Dohyun looked at his reflection in the window. He was not tall. He had messy black hair and tired eyes. He smiled at himself. He was about to be the only human on a ship full of aliens who hated smiling. This was going to be interesting. The shuttle docked with a soft bump. Dohyun grabbed his bag and walked to the door. When it opened, he saw a long white hallway. Everything was clean. Too clean. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all white. No pictures, no colors, no warmth. A Vellani officer was waiting for him. The officer was tall and thin. His skin was pale blue, and his eyes were gold. He did not smile. He did not even blink. "You are the human engineer," the officer said. It was not a question. "Yes," Dohyun said. "Kang Dohyun, nice to meet you." He held out his hand. The officer looked at it like it was a strange insect. "Follow me," the officer said, and turned away. Dohyun lowered his hand. "Okay then," he muttered. They walked through the ship. Dohyun tried to look around, but everything looked the same. White walls, white doors, silent Vellani walking past without looking at him. No one talked. No one laughed. The only sound was their footsteps. Finally, they reached a large room. It was some kind of meeting hall. Several Vellani stood inside, all wearing the same gray uniforms. And at the center of the room, there was a woman. No, not a woman. A Vellani female. But Dohyun could not stop staring. She was tall, like all Vellani. Her skin was silver blue, smooth like water under moonlight. Her hair was long and white, pulled back in a tight style. Her ears were long and pointed, and they moved slightly as she spoke. And her eyes were pale violet, like the sky just before night comes. She was giving orders to the others. Her voice was calm and clear. Every word was sharp and exact. She did not waste a single breath. Dohyun felt his heart beat a little faster. He did not know why. The gold-eyed officer stepped forward. "Senior Officer Lyra," he said, "the human has arrived." The woman stopped talking. She turned her head slowly and looked at Dohyun. Her violet eyes moved over him like she was reading a report. Cold, empty, measuring. "You are the engineer," she said. "Yes," Dohyun said. He tried to smile. "Kang Dohyun. Thank you for having me." She did not react. "You will report to the lower engineering deck. Your quarters are on level 4. Do not enter restricted areas. Do not disrupt the crew. Do your work." That was it. No welcome, no handshake, nothing. "Understood," Dohyun said. Lyra turned back to the others and continued giving orders. Dohyun stood there for a moment, then followed the gold-eyed officer out of the room. As they walked, Dohyun noticed something strange. The other Vellani in the meeting room had kept their distance from Lyra. They did not stand too close. They did not look at her directly. It was like there was an invisible wall around her. "Is she always like that?" Dohyun asked the officer. The officer did not answer. Dohyun arrived at his quarters. The room was small. There was a bed, a desk, and a small screen on the wall. Nothing else. He put his bag down and sat on the bed. It was hard, like sleeping on a rock. He sighed. Home, sweet home. Over the next few days, Dohyun started his work. The engineering deck was impressive. The Vellani technology was advanced, much better than anything on Earth. But it was also strange. The machines were quiet. Too quiet. On Earth, engines hummed and clicked and groaned. Here, everything was silent. Dohyun worked hard. He learned the systems quickly. The other Villani engineers watched him but did not speak to him. When he asked questions, they gave short answers. When he made small jokes, they stared at him like he was broken. But he kept working, and he kept watching. He noticed that Lyra came to the engineering deck often. She said it was for inspections. But Do-Yun saw her walking slowly, looking at the machines, running her fingers along the walls. Sometimes she stood by the window and stared at the stars for a long time. And he noticed something else. When she was alone, her face changed. The cold mask slipped, just a little. Her eyes became softer, sadder. One evening, Do-Hyun was eating alone in the meal hall. The Villani food was tasteless, like eating gray paste. He missed his grandmother's cooking. He missed the smell of rice and soup. He missed home. Then he saw Lyra enter the hall. She took her food and sat at a table in the corner, alone. The other Villani did not look at her. They did not invite her to sit with them. She ate in silence, her eyes fixed on the table. Do-Hyun watched her for a long moment. He did not understand Villani culture. He did not understand their rules or their coldness, but he understood loneliness. He had seen it before, in the eyes of people who had been pushed away, people who did not fit. Lyra finished her meal and left without a word. Do-Hyun watched her go. That night, lying on his hard bed, Do-Hyun stared at the ceiling. "She's intense," he whispered to himself in Korean. Scary, even. But also, he could not find the right word. Impressive? Beautiful? Sad? He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but he kept seeing those violet eyes, cold on the outside, but something else underneath, something hidden, something waiting. 3 weeks passed on the Villani ship. Do-Hyun learned many things. He learned how to fix their engines. He learned how to read their strange language. He learned how to eat their tasteless food without making a face. But he could not learn how to live without warmth. On Earth, people smiled at each other. They said good morning. They laughed at small things. They touched each other on the shoulder and said, "Good job," or "Are you okay?" These small things made life feel alive. On this ship, there was nothing. The Villani did not smile. They did not laugh. They did not touch. Every conversation was about work. Every word was measured and cold. Do-Hyun felt like he was living inside a machine, clean, efficient, and completely empty. He tried to adapt. He really did. But some things were too hard to change. One day, Do-Hyun was working on a broken power unit with 2 Villani engineers. Their names were Torin and Vess. They were young, probably the same age as Do-Hyun in human years, but they acted like old men, serious, quiet, boring. Do-Hyun finished reconnecting a wire and wiped his forehead. "There," he said. "That should do it. This old thing was fighting me, but I won." Torin and Vess looked at him. "The machine was not fighting you," Torin said slowly. "It does not have consciousness." Do-Hyun blinked. "No, I know. I meant, it's just an expression, a joke." They stared at him. "A joke?" Vess asked. "What is the purpose of a joke?" Do-Hyun opened his mouth, then closed it again. "How do you explain humor to someone who has never laughed?" It's to make things lighter," he said. "To make work feel less heavy. To connect with people." The 2 Villani looked at each other. Then they looked back at Do-Hyun. "That is inefficient," Torin said. They returned to their work. Do-Hyun sighed. At that moment, the door opened. Lyra walked in. She was doing one of her inspections. Her violet eyes moved across the room, checking everything. When she saw the 3 of them, she walked closer. "Status report," she said. "The power unit is repaired," Torin answered. "The human fixed it." Lyra looked at Do-Hyun. He felt her eyes on him like cold water. "Good," she said. Then she turned to leave. Do-Hyun, without thinking, spoke up. "You know, senior officer, you could say thank you sometimes. It's a human thing. Makes people feel appreciated." The room went silent. Torin and Vess froze. Lyra stopped walking. Slowly, she turned around. Her face was like stone. But Do-Hyun noticed something. Her ears moved. Just a tiny bit. A small twitch at the tips. "Frivolous expressions," she said, her voice flat, "disrupt efficiency. They create confusion. They serve no logical purpose." She stepped closer to him. Do-Hyun felt his heart beat faster, but he did not step back. "You are here to work," Lyra continued. not to teach us your human habits. Do you understand? Do-Yun met her eyes. I understand. She stared at him for a long moment. Her ears twitched again. Then she turned and walked out of the room without another word. Torin and Vess looked at Do-Hyun with something close to fear. You should not speak to the senior officer like that, Vess whispered. Why not? Do-Hyun asked. I was just being honest. Torin shook his head. Humans are very strange. That night, Do-Hyun could not sleep. He kept thinking about Lyra, about her cold words, about that small twitch in her ears. The other Vellani did not do that. When they spoke, their faces were completely still, like masks. But Lyra was different. Something moved under her surface, something she was trying to hide. Do-Hyun sat up and turned on the small screen in his room. He opened the ship's database and searched for information about Vellani culture. He read for hours. The Vellani had a long history. Thousands of years ago, they were different. They felt emotions strongly, too strongly. Their feelings led to great wars. Millions died. Entire cities burned because of anger, jealousy, and hate. After the wars, the survivors made a choice. They decided that emotions were dangerous. They built a new society based on logic and control. Children were taught from birth to suppress their feelings, to hide them, to pretend they did not exist. Showing emotion in public was considered shameful. Expressing admiration or affection was almost forbidden. Compliments were rare. Love was spoken about only in whispers, behind closed doors, if at all. Do-Hyun put down the screen and stared at the wall. These people had been hurt so badly that they decided to stop feeling. They locked their hearts away to protect themselves. And now, thousands of years later, they lived in beautiful ships and had amazing technology. But they were empty inside. He thought about Lyra eating alone. He thought about how the others avoided her. He thought about that tiny twitch in her ears, the only sign that something alive still existed beneath her cold mask. That sounds lonely, Do-Hyun whispered to himself. He thought about Earth, about his family, his mother who hugged him every time he came home, his father who patted his back and said he was proud, his grandmother who smiled with her whole face when she cooked for him. Humans were not perfect. They fought too. They hurt each other. But they also loved openly. They laughed loudly. They cried together. Maybe that was what made humans different. Not their technology, not their strength, but their willingness to feel, even when it hurt. The next morning, Do-Hyun saw Lyra in the hallway. She was walking toward the command deck, her face as cold as always. He stepped aside to let her pass. As she walked by, he said quietly, "Good morning, senior officer." She stopped. She did not turn around. For a moment, there was silence. Do-Hyun waited. Then very softly, so soft he almost did not hear it, she spoke. "Good morning." And she kept walking. Do-Hyun stood there watching her go. A small smile touched his lips. It was just 2 words. But on this cold, silent ship, it felt like a crack in the ice. A tiny crack. But even small cracks can grow. Do-Hyun was working in a small control room on the lower deck when the lights turned red. A loud sound filled the ship. The floor shook, and then everything went dark. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the emergency lights came on, weak and yellow. Do-Hyun stood up slowly, his heart beating fast. "What the hell was that?" he muttered. The door opened behind him. Lyra rushed in, her violet eyes sharp and focused. She went straight to the main control panel and started pressing buttons. Her fingers moved fast, like she had done this 1,000 times. "Radiation storm," she said. Her voice was calm, but Do-Hyun could hear the tension underneath. "It came faster than predicted. The ship has entered emergency lockdown." "Lockdown?" Do-Hyun walked closer. "What does that mean?" "All doors are sealed. The outer shields are up. We cannot move from this room until the storm passes." Do-Hyun looked at the door. It was thick metal, completely closed. He tried to press the button, but nothing happened. "How long?" he asked. Lyra checked the screen. 6 hours, maybe more. Do-Hyun sat down on a metal box. He let out a long breath. 6 hours trapped in a small room with the coldest person on the ship. This was going to be fun. The first hour was silent. Lyra sat at the control panel watching the screens. Radiation levels, shield strength, system status. She did not move. She did not speak. She barely breathed. Do-yoon tried to be patient. He really did. But silence was not something he was good at. So, he said finally, this happens often? Radiation storms? Lyra did not look at him. Sometimes. And the ship can handle it? Yes. Good, that's good. Silence again. Do-yoon tapped his fingers on his knee. He looked around the room. There was nothing interesting. Just machines, screens, and gray walls. He tried again. I've never been in a radiation storm before. On Earth, we have regular storms. Rain, wind, thunder. When I was young, my grandmother would make hot soup during storms. We would sit by the window and watch the lightning. Lyra said nothing, but her ear twitched. Do-yoon kept talking. The rain in Seoul is different from other places. It's soft, gentle. Sometimes it falls for days without stopping. People complain about it, but I always liked it. It felt peaceful. He looked at Lyra's back. She was still facing the screen, but her hands had stopped moving. Do you have rain on your planet? He asked. There was a long pause. Then slowly Lyra turned her head. Not fully, just enough to see him from the corner of her eye. We have moisture cycles, she said. Controlled precipitation. It falls at scheduled times in designated areas. Do-yoon blinked. Scheduled rain? That's very practical. It is efficient. But is it beautiful? Lyra did not answer. She turned back to the screen. But something had changed. The silence was not as heavy anymore. By the third hour, Lyra had turned her chair slightly. She was still watching the screens, but now she was facing Do-hyun more than before. He told her about Earth, about the oceans that covered most of the planet, about mountains that touched the clouds, about forests where the trees were so thick you could not see the sun, about cities full of people, noise and life. Lyra listened. She did not interrupt. She did not agree or disagree, but she listened. And then, in the fourth hour, she asked her first question. Why do humans smile at strangers? Do-hyun thought about it. I don't know. To be friendly, I guess. To say, I see you, and I mean no harm. It's a way of connecting. Lyra tilted her head. But the stranger is unknown. You do not know their intentions. Smiling at them serves no protective purpose. No, Do-hyun agreed, but it makes the world feel less cold. Her ears moved slightly. She looked down at her hands. And why do humans touch each other so freely? She asked. I have seen it in records. You hold hands, you embrace. You put your arms around each other's shoulders. It's comfort, Do-hyun said. When someone is sad or scared or happy, we want to share that feeling. Touch is a way of saying, you are not alone. Lyra was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than before. Among my people, touch is rare. We do not embrace. We do not hold hands. Physical contact is reserved for medical purposes or reproduction. Nothing more. Do-hyun felt something heavy in his chest. That sounds efficient, Lyra said quickly. I was going to say lonely. She looked at him then. Really looked. Her violet eyes were wide, and for a moment, the mask fell away. He saw something underneath. Something tired. Something sad. I have always felt... She stopped. Her jaw tightened. She looked away. Felt what? Do-hyun asked gently. The silence stretched between them. The ship hummed quietly around them. Outside, the radiation storm raged against the shields. Finally, Lyra spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I have always felt too much, since I was a child. Emotions that I could not control. Feelings that did not follow logic. My teachers tried to train it out of me. My family tried to help me hide it. But it never went away. She paused. Her hands were gripping the edge of her chair. That is why the others avoid me, she continued. They can sense it, the weakness inside me. They keep their distance because they are afraid it might spread. Do-hyun stood up slowly. He walked closer but did not touch her. He just stood there close enough for her to feel his presence. Lyra, he said quietly, feeling things is not a weakness. It's what makes you alive. She shook her head. You do not understand. In my world, it is a disease, a failure. Then maybe your world is wrong. Her ears flushed slightly. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with something he could not name. You speak so freely, she whispered. Are you not afraid of what others think? Do-yun smiled softly. Sometimes, but I'd rather be honest and scared than silent and safe. The lockdown ended an hour later. The doors opened, the lights returned to normal. Lyra stood up and straightened her uniform. The mask was back on her face. But before she left, she stopped at the door. Thank you, she said quietly, for talking. Then she was gone. Do-yun stood alone in the empty room. His heart was beating in a strange way. Not fast, not slow, just different. Something had changed. He could feel it. Something had begun. After the radiation storm, everything looked the same. The ship was still white and silent. The Villani still walked past without smiling. The food was still gray and tasteless. But something was different. Lyra began appearing in the engineering deck more often. She said it was for inspections. She said it was her duty as senior officer. But Do-yun noticed that she always came when he was working. She always stood near his station. She always stayed a little longer than necessary. The other engineers noticed too. Torin and Vess exchanged looks whenever Lyra entered the room. They whispered to each other when she left, but they said nothing directly. One morning, Lyra assigned herself to a project Do-yun was working on. It was a small repair job on the backup communication system. Nothing important. Nothing that needed a senior officer's attention. But there she was, standing next to him, reading the technical reports on her screen. You don't have to be here, Do-yun said. This is basic work. I can handle it alone. I am aware, Lyra replied. I am here for oversight. Oversight? Quality control? Do-yun smiled to himself. Sure. They worked together in silence for a while, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not cold, not empty, just quiet. Do-yun found himself enjoying her presence. She was efficient, yes. Precise, yes. But also patient. She did not rush him. She did not criticize his methods. She just watched and learned. And sometimes when he glanced at her, he caught her watching him instead of the machines. The changes were small, so small that most people would not notice. But Do-hyun noticed everything. She stood closer now, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the coolness of her skin. When they talked, she faced him fully instead of turning away. And once, just once, she almost smiled. Her lips moved slightly upward for half a second before she caught herself. But the biggest change came one evening in the meal hall. Do-yun was sitting alone, poking at his gray food with a small tool. He had given up trying to eat it. He was just moving it around the plate, thinking about his grandmother's cooking. Then someone sat across from him. He looked up. It was Lyra. She placed her tray on the table and began eating without a word. Do-yun stared at her in surprise. Senior officer, he said. Are you lost? She did not react. This seat was available. There are 50 available seats. This one was closest. Do-yun bit back a laugh. Right. They ate in silence, but it was comfortable, easy, like sitting with an old friend who did not need words to fill the space. Around them, the other Villani watched with wide eyes. This was unprecedented, a senior officer eating with the human, at the same table, in public. But Lyra did not seem to care, or maybe she had stopped caring. Do-hyun did not know which, but he was glad either way. From that night on, Lyra sat with him at meals. Not every night, but often enough that people started to talk. Do-hyun heard the whispers. He saw the stares, but he ignored them. Let them talk, he thought. Let them wonder. One night, Do-hyun was working late. Everyone else had gone to their quarters. The engineering deck was empty and dim. Only the emergency lights were on, casting long shadows across the floor. He was struggling with a faulty coil. It kept sparking and dying. He had been trying to fix it for 2 hours. Come on, he muttered in Korean. Work with me here. Don't be stubborn. He did not hear the door open behind him. You speak to machines as though they can hear you. Do-hyun jumped and turned around. Lyra was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her head tilted. You scared me, he said, putting a hand on his chest. That was not my intention. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to hear you bargaining with a machine? Do-hyun laughed. Sometimes they listen better than people. Lyra walked closer. Her footsteps were silent on the metal floor. She stopped next to him and looked at the broken coil. You are having difficulty, she observed. Yeah, this thing hates me. The coil does not have the capacity to hate. Tell that to my burned fingers. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and touched the coil. Her fingers moved gently, carefully, adjusting something Doyun could not see. There was a soft click, and suddenly the coil lit up. Stable. Working. Doyun stared at it. How did you do that? Experience, Lyra said simply. She straightened up and looked at him. They were close now, closer than they had ever been. In the dim light, her silver-blue skin seemed to glow faintly. Her violet eyes were soft. You are a strange human, she said quietly. Do-Yun smiled. Do-Yun. She blinked. What? My name. It's Do-Yun. Not human. Not engineer. Do-Yun. Lyra was silent. Her ears moved slightly and he saw a faint color rise to their tips. Was she embarrassed? Nervous? He could not tell. Then slowly, carefully, like she was speaking a foreign language for the first time, she said it. Do-Yun. His name and her voice sounded different, softer, like music. Something shifted in his chest, a warmth he had not felt in weeks, maybe months. He did not know what to call it, but it made him want to hear her say his name again. There you go, he said softly. Was that so hard? She did not answer, but she did not look away either. They stood there in the dim light, surrounded by machines and silence, looking at each other. Outside the ship, stars burned in the endless dark. Inside, something else was starting to burn. Something small but powerful. Something that neither of them could name yet, but they felt it. They both felt it. Finally, Lyra stepped back. She straightened her uniform and cleared her throat. It is late, she said. Her voice was slightly unsteady. You should rest. So should you. She nodded once. Then she turned and walked toward the door. But before she left, she paused. Good night, she said quietly. Do-Hyun. And then she was gone. Do-Hyun stood alone in the engineering deck. The fixed coil hummed softly beside him. His heart was beating in that strange way again. He smiled to himself in the dark. Good night, Lyra, he whispered. The ship was still cold. The walls were still white. The silence was still heavy. But Do-Hyun did not feel alone anymore. Not even a little. The unstable star at the center of the system was days away from a massive flare. When it happened, the radiation would destroy everything nearby. The research ship had to deploy a network of shielding satellites before the flare hit. If they failed, months of scientific data would be lost. Lyra chose to lead the mission personally. She would fly a small two-person shuttle to the deployment zone and activate the satellites one by one. It was risky work. Close to the star, close to death. She needed an engineer to handle the technical systems. She chose Do-Hyun. When he heard the news, he did not hesitate. He packed his tools and met her at the shuttle bay within the hour. The other Villani watched them leave. Their faces were blank as always, but Do-Hyun could feel their surprise. A senior officer flying with a human. Into danger. Together. Let them wonder, he thought. The shuttle was small, just 2 seats, a control panel, and a narrow window. Do-Hyun sat beside Lyra as she guided them out of the main ship and into open space. The star was beautiful and terrifying. It filled the window like a god of fire. Orange and red and gold, swirling with power that humans could not understand. Do-Hyun had never seen anything like it. He felt small, tiny, like a single grain of sand facing an ocean. It's incredible, he whispered. Lyra glanced at him. It is dangerous. Can it be both? She did not answer, but her ear twitched. They reached the deployment zone. One by one, Lyra positioned the shuttle near each satellite, while Do-Hyun activated them remotely. It was slow, careful work. Every move had to be exact. One mistake could send them spinning into the star's gravity. By the 5th satellite, Do-Hyun's hands were sweating. The heat was rising, even through the shuttle's shields. Warning lights flickered on the control panel. 2 more, Lyra said. Her voice was steady, but he could see the tension in her jaw. Copy that. They deployed the 6th satellite without problems. But when they moved to the 7th, something went wrong. A solar flare burst from the star's surface. Smaller than the predicted one, but still powerful. It hit the shuttle like a giant fist. The ship spun. Alarms screamed. Doyun was thrown against his seat, the straps cutting into his shoulders. Through the spinning window, he saw fire and stars and fire again. "Lyra!" he shouted. She was fighting the controls. Her hands moved fast, pulling and pushing, trying to stabilize the shuttle. Her face was focused, calm, beautiful even now. "Hold on," she said. Doyun gripped the sides of his seat. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He wanted to help, but there was nothing he could do. The engineering systems were offline. Only Lyra could save them now. Seconds passed. Maybe minutes. Time became meaningless in the spinning chaos. Then slowly the shuttle stopped spinning. The stars steadied. The alarms went quiet. They were alive. Doyun let out a breath he did not know he was holding. His whole body was shaking. "Are you injured?" Lyra asked. No, I'm okay." He looked at her. "Are you?" She nodded, but her hands were trembling on the controls. They sat in silence for a moment. The shuttle drifted gently now, caught between the pull of the star and the push of space. Through the window, the star still burned. But it seemed less frightening now. Doyun looked at Lyra. She was breathing slowly, trying to calm herself. Her silver-blue skin was glowing faintly in the starlight. Her white hair had come loose from its tight style, falling softly around her face. Her violet eyes were wide and alive, still filled with the fire of survival. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And before he could stop himself, he said it. "You're gorgeous." Lyra stopped. Completely. Her hands froze on the controls. Her breathing stopped. Even her ears stopped moving. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were so wide that he could see the reflection of stars in them. "What?" she whispered. Doyun felt his face get warm. He had not meant to say it out loud, but he could not take it back now. And honestly, he did not want to. "You're gorgeous," he said again. I had to say it." Lyra stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since he had met her, she seemed completely lost, like she did not know what to do with her body, her face, her words. And then he saw it. Her ears began to change color. The pale silver blue turned deep violet, spreading from the tips down to the base. It was like watching a flower bloom, slow and beautiful and impossible to look away from. She was blushing. "I'm—" Her voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. "I'm hearing this for the first time." Doyun blinked. "What? No one's ever told you that before?" She shook her head slowly. Her eyes were shining, not with pride or happiness, but with something deeper, something painful. "Villani do not speak such things," she said. "We do not give compliments. We do not praise appearance or express admiration openly. It is considered inappropriate, unnecessary." Do-hyun felt his chest tighten. 28 years old, a senior officer, one of the most capable people on the entire ship. And no one had ever told her she was beautiful. "That's insane," he said softly. She looked at him. Her mask was completely gone now. There was no coldness, no logic, no control. Just Lyra, raw and real. "You are brilliant," Do-hyun continued. "You are brave. You just saved our lives without even flinching. And yes, you are beautiful, gorgeous. How has no one ever said that to you?" She could not answer. Her hands were trembling now. Her jaw was tight. And then something happened that Do-hyun had never seen before. A tear fell from her eye, but it was not like human tears. It was silver, glowing, like liquid starlight running down her cheek. "I did not know," she whispered, "that words could feel like this." Do-hyun wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to hold her, but he did not know if that was allowed. He did not know what would break and what would heal, so he just sat there close to her, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel. "You deserve to hear it," he said quietly. "Every day, from someone who means it." She looked at him for a long moment. The stars burned around them. The universe was vast and cold and endless. But in that small shuttle, something warm was growing. Something that neither of them had expected. Something that changed everything. Finally, Lyra took a deep breath. She wiped the silver tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. "We should deploy the last satellite," she said. Her voice was still unsteady. Do-hyun nodded. Yeah, yeah, we should." She turned back to the controls. The shuttle began to move again, but before she started, she reached out with one hand. She did not touch him. She just held her hand in the space between them, open, waiting. And Do-hyun, understanding, reached out too. Their fingers touched, just barely, just for a moment. It was the smallest touch in the universe, but it meant everything. The shuttle returned to the main ship just as the star released its massive flare. The shielding satellites worked perfectly. The research data was saved. The mission was a complete success, but no one was celebrating. When Do-hyun and Lyra stepped off the shuttle, a group of Vellani officers was waiting for them. Their faces were blank, but their eyes were sharp, watching, judging. One of them stepped forward. He was older than the others, with pale gold skin and eyes like cold metal. His name was High Counselor Marn, and he was the most senior Vellani on the ship. "Senior Officer Lyra," he said. His voice was flat, empty. "You will come with us." Lyra straightened her back. "May I ask why?" "There has been a report. Your behavior during the mission has raised concerns." Do-hyun felt his stomach drop. He looked at Lyra, but she did not look back. Her face was stone again. The mask was back. "What kind of concern?" she asked. Marn did not answer. He simply turned and walked away. The other officers surrounded Lyra and guided her down the hallway. She went without fighting, without speaking, like a prisoner accepting her fate. Do-hyun tried to follow, but one of the officers blocked his path. "This does not involve you, human," the officer said. "Like hell it doesn't. What did she do wrong?" The officer stared at him with empty eyes. "Emotional contamination. It is a serious condition. She must be evaluated." Then the officer turned and walked away, leaving Do-hyun alone in the shuttle bay. Emotional contamination. The words echoed in his head. They were punishing her for feeling, for being alive, for that single tear on her cheek. Do-hyun stood there for a long moment. His hands were shaking. Not with fear, with anger. He would not let this happen. It took him an hour to find out where they had taken her. The council chamber was on the upper deck, a large room with a high ceiling and cold white walls. Normally, only senior officers were allowed inside, but Do-hyun did not care about rules anymore. He walked through the ship like a man on fire. Vellani stepped out of his way, their eyes wide with confusion. No one tried to stop him. Maybe they were too surprised. Maybe they wanted to see what would happen. When he reached the council chamber, 2 guards stood at the door. They crossed their arms when they saw him. "Humans are not permitted here," one said. Do-hyun did not slow down. "Get out of my way. You cannot—" He pushed past them and opened the door. Inside, the chamber was full of Vellani officers. They sat in rows like judges in a court. At the front, on a raised platform, sat High Counselor Marn and 2 other senior officials. And in the center of the room, standing alone, was Lyra. She looked small. Smaller than he had ever seen her. Her head was slightly bowed. Her hands were clasped in front of her. The proud, strong woman he knew was being treated like a criminal. Every eye in the room turned to Do-hyun as he walked in. "This chamber is closed to outsiders," Marn said coldly. "Remove yourself immediately." Do-hyun kept walking until he stood next to Lyra. She looked at him with wide, shocked eyes. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Standing with you," he said. Marn's eyes narrowed. "You have no authority here, human. This is a Vellani matter." "You're putting her on trial for having feelings," Do-hyun said. His voice was steady, but there was fire underneath. "That makes it my matter too." The chamber fell silent. The Vellani officers exchanged looks. This had never happened before. Marn leaned forward. "Senior Officer Lyra has shown signs of emotional contamination." She was seen displaying physical signs of emotion in front of crew members. Flushed ears, visible distress, perhaps even tears. This is unacceptable behavior for an officer of her rank. "Unacceptable?" Do-hyun laughed bitterly. "She just saved the entire mission. She flew into a radiation zone and brought us back alive. And you're punishing her because her ears changed color?" "You do not understand our ways," Marn said. "No, you don't understand anything at all." Do-hyun took a step forward. The guards moved toward him, but Marn raised a hand to stop them. He seemed curious, like he was watching a strange animal do an unexpected trick. You call feeling things a disease, Do-Yun said. You call it contamination, like it's something dirty, something shameful. But let me tell you what I see. He pointed at Lyra. I see someone who works harder than anyone else on this ship. I see someone who carries responsibility without complaint. I see someone who eats alone because your people are too afraid to sit with her. And why? Because she feels things. Because she's alive in a way that scares you. The chamber was completely silent. Even Lyra was staring at him, with her mouth slightly open. Do-Yun turned to face Marn directly. Humanity crossed the stars because we loved, we dreamed, we felt. We built spaceships because we looked at the moon and thought, I want to go there. We survived wars and plagues and disasters because we held on to each other and refused to give up. That's not weakness. That's strength. He took another step forward. His eyes never left Marn's. If that's contamination, then maybe your species needs more of it. Maybe you've been so busy being logical that you forgot how to live. The silence stretched on. Do-Hyun could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel every eye in the room on him. Then slowly, something unexpected happened. In the back of the chamber, a young Villani officer stood up. She was young, with pale blue skin and silver eyes. Her ears were trembling. I agree with the human, she said. Her voice was shaky but clear. Gasps filled the room. Another officer stood up. Then another. Then 5 more. They did not speak, but they stood. Silent support. A crack in the ice. Marn looked around the room. His face was still blank, but his eyes had changed. He was calculating, measuring. The balance of power was shifting, and he could feel it. Finally, he spoke. This council will take a recess to consider new information. Senior Officer Lyra will return to her quarters pending further review. It was not freedom, but it was not punishment either. Lyra turned to Do-Yun. Her eyes were shining with something he could not name. Gratitude, relief, love. You should not have done that, she whispered. Probably not, he admitted. You could have been expelled from the ship. Worth it. She stared at him for a long moment. Then very slowly she reached out and touched his hand. Just a light press of her fingers against his, in front of everyone. The chamber went completely silent again, but Lyra did not pull away, and neither did Do-Yun. Let them see, he thought. Let them learn. High Counselor Marn never announced a final decision. The matter was listed as under review, which meant it was quietly being forgotten. This was the Villani way. When something was too complicated, too controversial, they simply pretended it did not exist. Lyra was not punished, but she was not cleared either. She remained in a strange place between freedom and judgment. Some officers treated her with cold distance. Others nodded at her in the hallways. A few even said quiet words of support when no one else was listening. The young officer who had stood up in the council chamber visited Lyra one evening. Her name was Yuna, and she brought a gift. A small plant from the ship's botanical section. It is against regulations to remove plants, Yuna said nervously. But I thought you might like something alive in your quarters. Lyra held the plant carefully. Her eyes were soft. Thank you, Yuna. I wanted to say... Yuna paused, struggling with words she had never been taught to speak. I wanted to say that I admire you. I always have. You are strong, and I think the human is right. Feeling things is not a disease. Then she left quickly, before Lyra could respond. But Lyra stood there for a long time, holding the small plant, looking at it like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Something was changing on the ship. Not fast, not loud, but real. Villani engineers started sitting closer to Do-Hyun at meals. They asked him questions about Earth, about music, about family. At first, their questions were careful and formal, but slowly they became more curious, more open. Torin, the young engineer who had once called Do-Hyun strange, approached him one day in the engineering deck. I have been researching human art, Torin said. His ears twitched nervously. There is a form called music. I do not understand it. It serves no logical purpose. But when I listen to it, I feel... something. Do-Hyun smiled. That's the point, Torin. You're supposed to feel something. Torin thought about this for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Perhaps I will study it more. After the council meeting, Lyra was quietly removed from the command track. It was not official punishment. They called it a reassignment for specialized duties. But everyone knew the truth. She had become too different, too human. But Lyra did not seem to mind, because 3 days later, a new position was created on the ship. The Human Valani Cultural Exchange Initiative. Its purpose was to study human emotional expression and its potential benefits for Valani society. The program was experimental, controversial, and completely unexpected. The initiative needed a leader, someone who understood both worlds, someone willing to cross the line between logic and feeling. They chose Lyra, and the initiative's first assignment was a 6-month mission to Earth. When Do-hyun heard the news, he found Lyra on the observation deck. She was standing alone, looking out at the stars. The unstable star was far behind them now. Ahead lay only the endless dark and the distant light of other suns. So, he said, walking up beside her. Earth. She nodded. Earth. Have you ever been there? No, I have only seen images. Blue water, green land, white clouds. She paused. It looks beautiful. It is. Messy and loud and crowded, but beautiful. They stood in silence for a moment. The stars burned quietly around them. I am afraid, Lyra said suddenly. Do-hyun looked at her. Of Earth? She shook her head. Of feeling. Of not being able to stop. She turned to face him. Her violet eyes were deep and uncertain. All my life, I have been taught that emotions are dangerous, that they must be controlled, hidden, destroyed. She touched her chest, where her heart was. But since I met you, I cannot control it anymore. Every day I feel more. Fear, hope, happiness, sadness, and something else. Something I do not have a word for. Do-hyun felt his own heart beating faster. What does it feel like? Lyra was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Like warmth. Like standing in sunlight after years of cold. Like wanting to be near someone, even when there is no logical reason. Like their presence makes everything better. She looked at him. Like how I feel when I am with you. Do-hyun could not speak. His throat was tight. His chest was full of something so big he could not name it. That's love, Lyra, he said finally, or the beginning of it. Her ears flushed deep violet. Love, she repeated. The human word. It's scary, Do-hyun admitted. Even for us. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes it hurts. But it's also the best thing in the universe. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. The stars reflected in her eyes. The ship hummed softly around them. In the distance, Earth's sun was waiting. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. I do not know how to feel freely, how to love openly, how to be what you need. Do-hyun smiled softly. Then slowly and carefully, he reached out and took her hand. This time she did not pull away. That's the best part, he said. You don't have to know. You just have to try. And you don't have to do it alone. Her fingers tightened around his. Her hand was cool against his warmth, different but perfect. Will you help me? She asked. Will you teach me? I'll do better than that, Do-hyun said. I'll learn with you, because honestly, I don't know how to do this either. Loving someone from another world. It's new for both of us. Lyra smiled. It was small, unpracticed, awkward, but it was real. And it was the most beautiful thing Do-hyun had ever seen. Outside the observation window, the ship's engines powered up. The stars began to shift as they prepared to jump toward Earth's solar system, toward rain and mountains and oceans, toward music and laughter and crowded streets, toward a world where people smiled at strangers and held hands in public and said, I love you, like it was the most natural thing in the universe. Lyra did not know what was waiting for her. She did not know if she would fit in, if she would be accepted, if she would be happy. But she knew one thing. She would not be alone. She looked at Do-hyun. He looked back at her. And as the ship leaped toward the light, their hands stayed together. Two people from different stars, finding home in each other. The end was really just a beginning, a new star burning bright.